Going live. This is Hannibal from the HannibalTV.com. It's 1:09 a.m. and I am live here October 4th, bringing you my review of this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, which just came out at about 8 p.m. last night. But I'm just getting back from the gym now, so I'm going to read it to you now. The most important notes, the points and the notes I took from this week's Observer. First, for WWE news, the Raw this past Monday, which was billed as the season premiere, was up 16.3% with an average of 2,570,000 viewers. And the highlight of that show was Hulk Hogan 66 and Ric Flair 70 doing a segment. Richard Young says hello from Australia. Hello to you. I'm actually going to be interviewing UFC star Mark Hunt, who is also in Australia, in the coming weeks, probably around this time because it's early for you guys. This past week, it has been confirmed that CM Punk, who is now 41, had a tryout to be a regular panelist on the new WWE Backstage at Fox show. And around the same time, him and his former best friend, Colt Cabana, settled their lawsuit that had to do with the whole WWE lawsuit that Punk was involved with. I think Colt Cabana is one of the most overrated wrestlers around. I've seen a bunch of his matches, mostly the ones from the Iowa shows that I've attended, and he bores the living hell out of me. Salim Hussein says hello, good morning to you as well. As far as CM Punk and WWE, they don't need him in a lot of ways and probably don't want him, according to Meltzer, but they really don't want him going to AEW, who is also not thrilled to do business with him apparently, but there is interest from both companies as he is, even though he lost both of his UFC fighters as far as free agents that are still able to wrestle. He's probably the biggest one that has been a former WWE champion in the past, and there is lots of money to throw around at him from WWE's side. But Fox is in charge of the Fox show, so if they like Punk, they can take him whether WWE likes it or not. It's going to be a show similar to UFC tonight. And according to Dave Meltzer, the people at Fox are a lot more knowledgeable about the WWE product than the people at USA. Someone's asking if Teddy Hart has given any news about AEW yet. When I talked to him on the phone the other week, he's tied up in MLW for a while. And I was on a conference call with the MLW owner, Court Bauer, earlier this week. I put a couple clips of that up on the Hannibal TV. One of the clips he was talking about, there is a working relationship with AEW. For instance, they're using Tony Schiavone while he's also under contract with MLW, but they don't have to worry about Schiavone losing. It's going to be MJF is under a similar deal, but we saw MJF win on AEW Dynamite last night. So it really depends how they're going to use the people, because they don't want their wrestlers going onto AEW TV and getting beat, obviously. So it's a little complicated, but yeah, Ted, I really don't want to get into what he was saying in the private conversation, but as everyone watching this knows, you guys are all knowledgeable. There's way, way more money in AEW than MLW. Jim Cornette has supposedly said there's no wrestler in AEW making under $100,000 a year, where to my knowledge, the MLW contracts aren't that big at this point. Salim Hussein says Punk ain't relevant. He isn't relevant, but I do think he would generate some interest in that Fox show. You have he says that AEW is making WWE spend a lot of money, which is good for the business. Yes, it is good for the business. Yeah, that is good for sure. It's good for the wrestlers to make more money. Hopefully, I can get on that gravy train somewhere in a company that allows me to still have my YouTube channel. WWE officially announced the next Saudi Arabia show is going to be Halloween night, with it being featured with Ric Flair team captaining a team against Hulk Hogan. So 2 legitimate senior citizens being featured, who I remember back in the 90s, WWE was calling them old. And now they're being featured on a pay-per-view 20 years later. And I'm not saying Hulk Hogan isn't great, but I did have some non-wrestling fans comment to me at the gym and so forth that they've seen in their Facebook feed posting these 2 old-looking guys, and they're still being used on WWE, like wondering why. And I'm like, well, it's because they don't have any new stars. The lawsuit with Flair has not been settled with WWE, but I guess Fox really wants all the top stars on the premiere show this Friday night, and the Saudi Arabia people want big stars. So for now, they're gonna keep using Flair, even though they don't usually use people that are involved in lawsuits with them. For instance, when Flair had the lawsuit against WCW, you might remember he was off TV for a huge period of time. Lobi Zuzo says, I liked Flair cutting the heel promo. I didn't actually see it. I couldn't be motivated enough to watch it. I actually just have zero interest in watching anything to do with Hulk Hogan. I did have a comment from one of my masseuses today who was flipping through the channels, I guess, and asking me about who is this guy with the Halloween mask on, this mask character. She was like, oh, this is so cheesy. What's wrestling come to? I guess that was an old fan that used to watch it in the 90s. It's not a fan anymore, but questioned me about that, which I really don't know. For some WWE attendance notes, in St. Petersburg, Florida, NXT drew 250 fans on September 25th, or 26th, sorry, in St. Petersburg. On September 27th in Orlando, NXT drew 250 fans. They were also in Independence, Missouri on September 27th, where they drew 700 fans. They were in Fort Pierce, Florida, the 28th of September, and NXT drew 300 fans. September 29th, NXT was in South Haven, Mississippi, just outside of Memphis, where they drew 1,000 fans. NXT October 4th, the taping at Full Sail, which got its ass kicked by AEW, had 400 fans. There was not really any numbers reported from the WWE shows this past week. We know that the Raw premiere in Phoenix was a sellout. The SmackDown in LA, which hasn't happened yet, is another sellout. Those are huge shows. The September 29th Tucson house show, Raw, did 4,600, which is a good number. Someone says Bray has the best gimmick right now. What do I think about his gimmick? It's a Mankind rip-off type gimmick, and we all know that it was it's just doesn't do anything for me. Not at all. Because at least Mankind, when he played the unmasked characters, it was in WCW, so it was kind of fresh, but everybody knows who Bray Wyatt is. So I would find it cool if Waylon Mercy, who's the voice of the Buzzard, would appear, because I'm a huge fan of Danny Spivey. LJ Morgan says that Flair versus Hogan in a drinking contest would draw ratings. Well, Flair could die if he drinks again. So, yeah, that would draw ratings. He would probably die. So, yeah, Christopher Travers says, you know what I mean? Yes. That's in reference to Waylon Mercy, who I did a shoot interview with earlier this year. It's now posted free on YouTube. Cain Velasquez met with WWE officials in recent weeks, according to the Wrestling Observer, about coming in, and the whole Brock Lesnar angle with Rey Mysterio is to build towards that. Even though he hasn't signed yet, he's still in talks with AEW. He does like the luchador gimmick. WWE apparently wouldn't want him to do the luchador gimmick. They'd want to build between the Velasquez versus Lesnar feud, as Velasquez did get a first-round knockout in UFC versus Lesnar. AEW is interested in him, and in AEW he could probably also work for AAA and possibly New Japan, who are also interested in him. However, WWE could throw the most money at him. He is still under contract with UFC too. So if I was a betting man, I would say he's going to go to WWE because they're going to throw the most money at him. Eric Angle, the older brother of Kurt Angle, according to the Wrestling Observer, he was under WWE contract for about 3 years, was among people charged in a steroid distribution ring, according to Channel 11 News in Pittsburgh. Angle had also been in the news in March as a wrestling coach for a junior team, grabbing a 12-year-old kid by the throat and basically choke slamming him and shoving him. He was arrested for that assault, and he's since admitted that it was a mistake. Well, obviously, I'm sorry to hear that. I really am. Benjamin Deadmoon says, I managed to talk to a couple of old farts at work that tuned into AEW. They were reluctant at first, not due to not knowing any of the younger guys. They were happy to see Cody, Jake, and Moxley. Yeah, I mean, the smaller guys kind of turned me off, and the younger unknown guys. I watched the full first hour without any fast forwarding, but by the second hour, which was, I guess, a little bit into the Hangman Page match against the other little guy, I forget his name. It was just too much little guy wrestling for me, so I fast forwarded. I watched most of the girls' match. Riho impressed me. The main event, I just basically watched the Dean Ambrose part, and I watched the Jack Swagger thing at the end. Nathan Webster says Flair should do a kamikaze on a pole match as his final ring performance. I guess he owes a lot of money, so I guess he's probably still going to be working till the day he dies. So I don't think you're ever going to see a real Ric Flair final thing ever. He did that retirement match, then he wrestled in TNA in Australia after that. So he still wrestled. Okay, back to the AEW news. The preview show on TNT did 631,000 views. The attendance at the TV taping Wednesday night was 14,129 with 11,500 paid. According to Dave Meltzer, the empty seats were because scalpers bought a lot of tickets and couldn't unload them all at the end. So I suspected that in my AEW Dynamite review that I posted yesterday, that's why there was empty seats. Scalpers were the ones that bought them all up and they couldn't unload them all. And by the way, I guess AEW has been charging up to $3,000 for seats, and they had originally said they were going to make tickets for their events affordable. So, man, I could never have afforded that when I was a kid. I remember a ringside front row ticket was $20 up until the whole Attitude Era for house shows and even the Raw tapings. My Survivor Series 97 ticket was under $30. I could never have saved $3,000 on my allowance. The ratings obviously was the big win for AEW, although, of course, their attendance beat the 400 that NXT had, but they also destroyed NXT in the ratings, getting 1,409,000 views compared to NXT's 81,000 views. And they did a 0.68 rating compared to NXT's 0.32 rating. Obviously, that's probably going to go down next week. A lot of people were curious. I mean, I did watch it, but nothing about the show really made me want to tune in and watch the whole show again next week. If my critique of it gets something like 10,000 hits or maybe over 5,000 hits, maybe I'll do another one next week. But the only thing I might be interested in seeing next week is what they do with Swagger, which I'll probably just skip over to. But NXT, I have no interest in watching anything from the results that I read. The Real Frisco says he misses the intimidating wrestlers. So do I. I mean, Swagger is a big guy, but like, who in that AEW show was intimidating? Nobody at all, other than Swagger to me. Chris Jericho did a great job, though. I'm not taking away from him, and great outfit on him, but yeah, I like watching big wrestlers because I'm a heavyweight. Same with MMA fighters, but I do also enjoy watching girls. I'll be honest, I'm not really into the transgender match. If that had been a girl versus girl match, I probably wouldn't have fast-forwarded through it. I'm just not into it. That's just my own taste. I'm sure there's people that is, but some people have pointed out that they've stopped referring to her as a transgender, which is unusual because at first they were really pushing that. Patrick J says most of the AEW wrestlers look like toddlers. Yeah. Someone says they're not really into women's wrestling. Well, I'm into watching good-looking girls. I'm very heterosexual, so that's why I like women's wrestling. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature on AEW's debut where Chris Jericho was quoted saying, "Having full control as an artist, to be creative and call my own shots is refreshing." And Cody said the product would be completely different from WWE. The only thing that is similar is the fact that there's a ring in the center of the arena. Jimmy Jacobs, I guess of Impact, was in the same article. He's a former WWE scriptwriter, and he's actually going to be on a December 6th CWE event in Ottawa that the Hannibal TV is taping. But Jimmy Jacobs said, a 2-hour show every week with no writers, that's not easy to do. You start burning through those matches real quick. Well, I disagree with that. Wrestling has sucked ever since writers came in. Even when Vince Russo was first working in the Attitude Era with Vince McMahon, there wasn't a big writing team, and it was all wrestling people. So yeah, writers have ruined wrestling. Wrestling is very simple. They don't need long scripted promos and stupid comedy skits that aren't funny and stupid backstage segments, crap stuff like the stupid 24-hour title. Chet9 says WWE has sucked since 2003. And Christopher Taver says, yeah, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara were the writers. So basically it wasn't a 30-man team. It was like them and Vince. Possibly Bruce Pritchard was involved at various times. The October 2nd AEW story in the Los Angeles Times was the most read story that day for the Times, even beating Donald Trump political coverage. Say what says, is Bruce Pritchard behind the 24/7 title? Who knows? But there's way too many titles. Somebody posted about the Clash of Champions show they did recently saying 10 title matches. Like at that point, titles are meaningless to have 10 title matches on a card. That's like everybody has a title. And people jump ship back and forth all the time. So why do we need 2 world titles, 2 tag titles, and so forth? There's way, way, way too many titles in WWE. For New Japan News, according to Sports Illustrated, Chris Jericho versus Hiroshi Tanahashi is going to be on the January 4th Wrestle Kingdom Tokyo Dome show. Peanut Butter says, I'm the vanilla midget champion of the world. Yeah. The Northeast New Japan Pro Wrestling house show loop started September 27th in Lowell with 2,130 fans. It was not a sellout. September 28th, the show that was delayed 90 minutes in New York drew 1,776 fans. September 29th, New Japan in Philadelphia drew 1,030 paid fans at the ECW Arena. Dio says, what are my thoughts on Tariq? I have no idea who that is. Kata Lowell says, yeah, I miss the good old days of wrestling. So do I. That's for sure. Great North Wrestling, we try and make it as close to the good old days as possible. For Ring of Honor news, there was very little interest in their Death Before Dishonor September 27th pay-per-view. According to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, that's the biggest news from Ring of Honor. They were in a 900-seat arena in Las Vegas. They had a very weak advance, and even with giving away tickets, there was maybe 600 in the building when they started the show. They managed to get about 800 people in the building. Apparently, there was about 800 pay-per-view buys. So about 1,600 people saw the show in total. The next day, September 28th, the Death Before Dishonor fallout happened back at Sam's Town with heavy papering again, according to Dave Meltzer. They drew 600. Apparently, stacks of free tickets were being given away all weekend. The next show is Glory by Honor, October the 12th in New Orleans, with Lanny Poffo as a special guest on the show. They also used Lanny Poffo on a Ring of Honor show in Atlanta recently. For why, I don't know. He's friends with Jay Lethal, but that puzzles me, to say the least. I don't think he's going to help their attendance problems. In Impact news, their September 27th Twitch taping that they promoted really hard around the Brian Cage versus Melissa Santos wedding had only 3,034 viewers on Twitch, which is horrible. Big 21 says, how close to death will Brock leave Kofi? Who knows, but I would say he's probably going to be the champion. With the Kofi experiment they canceled. I mean, I've listened to the Wrestling Observer Radio this year. He said that WWE canceled more shows than in his recollection since he started reporting. They've hit many all-time ratings lows. So I don't think Kofi has been that great of a drawing champion as much as people crucified superstar Billy Graham when he first went out on public record saying Kofi was a bad choice in champion. And by the way, Kofi, weren't you champion at the SmackDown at MSG that had the lowest attended TV taping in the history of WWE TV tapings in Madison Square Garden, where superstar Billy Graham holds the record for most consecutive Madison Square Garden sellouts, 19 out of 20, more than Hulk Hogan consecutive, more than Bruno Sammartino. And Dave Meltzer has confirmed that. So, yeah. Nothing against Kofi. I've wrestled him in Deep South Wrestling. But, I mean, if someone's flipping through the channels, he's not going to appeal to the masses. I posted a clip of Al Snow this week from an interview I did, which I allowed someone to also post on Twitter. They got my permission in exchange for an agreement. It has almost 1 million hits on Twitter. But he's talking about wrestling catering now to the minority, the people that like the small, high spotty wrestlers, rather than the majority of people. The average people don't like that, don't find that interesting. I don't find that interesting. I mean, the match in AEW between Kofi and whoever it was, I mean, they allowed that guy to kick out of so many big moves, and he's just a small guy and nobody knows who he is. I thought it was way too much for that little guy. But yeah. In UFC news, their show from Denmark at the Royal Arena drew a sellout of 12,767 fans with a gate of 1,600,000. The Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington fight is now official for December 14th, the pay-per-view in Las Vegas. Someone says Kofi is boring. Someone says I'd love to meet Hockey Tonk Man. In Bellator news, their September show in Dublin, September 27th, had 276,000 viewers. Chris Cyborg shot at Julia Budd's featherweight title will be on the January 25th return to the Forum in Los Angeles. Combate Americas on September 20th did 530,000 viewers. No date set yet for this Tito Ortiz versus Alberto El Patron feud. And I would like to say something else about AEW. I forgot to mention this, but I didn't watch it live, and I asked a lot of people about if they were able to get TSN on their cable, and they're not around here. So TSN is not as available now as it once was in the 90s when Raw and Nitro were on TSN. A lot of people don't get it, including my parents that used to get it, and at least 5 or 6 other people I asked. One of the people I talked to said they thought it was on TSN2, not the main TSN channel. I don't have confirmation on that. And I'll answer a couple of these questions. What are my thoughts on Mance Warner? I don't know who that is. Say what's his, would I ever do MMA? If I was paid enough where I could do nothing but train for the fight, for a good 8-week camp, yes. But my latest MMA offer was to fight for free, go through all the training to fight for free. No, thank you. I mean, I work a normal job. I'm doing lots of reporting. I do shoot interviews. I organize wrestling events. To train in MMA fighters are probably the best athletes in the world. You need to be fully dedicated to training, and I would not take an opportunity like that lightly. So, someone says they're still recording wrestling on their VCR. That's funny. Dio says that Lashley Lana bit on Monday was crazy. Don't know how I'd feel if I was Rusev. Maybe he's like, you see these videos of cuckolding and cuckold punishment pop up. Maybe he's one of these guys that gets off on seeing his wife with other men. I know I couldn't do that, especially since they're both on Raw, so they're on the road together. You know, the other wrestlers are ribbing him about it. And yeah, it's just a horribly awkward angle, but it got people talking about it. But yeah, so that's the Wrestling Observer review for this week. I also post this on the Great North Wrestling Podcast on iTunes. If you're in Drummondville, Quebec this weekend, October 5th, the Hannibal TV will be taping an event there featuring the Blood Hunter, Jeremy Prophet, Dark Cash, the high-flying Mathis Meyer, and other Great North Wrestling stars. And of course, October 19th is the huge Apocalypse event in Rockland. Someone's asking if they think I'll ever do documentaries about stuff. Maybe. So if I get a payment in advance for doing it, or bursary for doing a documentary? Yes, but I'm not really that interested in documentaries. And speaking of which, someone was asking the other day, the Lanny Poffo video of me with the locker room altercation, why were cameras back there? Because I had cameras following me for several years for the This Is Hannibal documentary that was done on me years ago. I don't like that time in my life, so I don't like thinking about that documentary, but that's why there was cameras. They didn't end up using that scene in the documentary because it was more of a documentary on my health. But they ended up giving me most of the B-roll from that documentary. That's why I posted it ultimately. So, yeah. Someone says Tony Khan called Jericho, Guevara, Santana, Ortiz, and Hager a stable. All right. Well, there's your answer on that. Someone says they think Lanny still holds a grudge about that incident. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that incident was Lanny Poffo agreed to be in that scene. He was paid for it. And he had no issues with it. It came out years later, and then he had an issue with it being out. So it's one of my annoyances with Lanny. Ciao, everyone. Have a good night.